Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, September the 22nd, Saturday afternoon. I'm Leon Davis, and I want to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. There are two branches of economics. There's microeconomics and macroeconomics. Macroeconomics, which is what I'll be talking about today, deals with with economics on the national level. Now, economics is an attempt to solve a problem, and that topic is coming up right now.
Welcome to Altitude Adjustment.
Again, thank you for joining me. Now, the free market system, also known as the market economy, has existed in different stages since the beginning of man. When communities were small, it was easy to trade goods and services with your neighbor. That became more complex as communities grew, and so there became a need to find a way to understand and deal with that. Now, the free markets are where people voluntarily trade economic goods and services, and it has been a natural progress for social coordination rather than a series of discoveries, although it wasn't until 1000 BCE that metallic coins were manufactured in China and became the first known example of a good that functioned only as money. Now, in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected and brought with him a less supported economic policy that was starkly different than the established policies that were popular at the time. His economic policy had four main parts. One, to reduce the growth of government spending. Two, reduce the federal income tax and capital gains tax. To reduce government regulation and tighten the money supply. Now, this economic policy was referred to by several different names, including Reaganomics, supply-side economics, and Voodoo Economics. Now, macroeconomics is an attempt to solve some of the major challenges in the market system. Now, one of the popular economic theories at the time was classical economics, which is classical economists believe that the market is self-regulating, that it will achieve a natural balance between prices, wages, demand, and production. After the Great Depression, after the stock market crash of 1929, John Keyes put a theory out. It's called the Keynesian economics. And Keynesian economics is a belief that government plays a role in balancing prices, wages, and the demand and production. Pardon me. So after Ronald Reagan came in, because the country used Keynesian as a standard after the great stock market crash. In the 80s, when Reagan took office and brought forth the supply side economics, it was considered not only not tested, but a bad economic theory, which is why it received the title Voodoo Economics. And there's a little more to why that happened. And in this discussion, I am probably oversimplifying economics. It is a lot more complicated than that, how they formulate what actions to be taken, how it's going to impact the economy, and how to measure results. But supply side economics supports business and allows business to regulate prices, wages, production, and demand. Now, in the early days of economy, people trading goods and services, it was pretty easy. You just create a basic one-on-one relationship and you trade goods and services. Now, as communities grew and goods and services, the number of goods and services offered, that all changed and trading became much more complicated. So if you had If you had corn and you needed meat, and somebody you wanted to trade with had I don't know, fabric, or I'm sorry, you wanted to trade with, they needed fabric, you needed meat. They didn't have that, so you had to wind up making a three-way trade in order for you to get what you needed and for them to get what they needed. So as you can see, as society grew and needs change, that becomes much more complicated. And so then the theories of economics are how to best allow business or create an environment where business serves the common good, where goods and services benefit the community as a whole. And you can see why that's important, especially on a national level. For a society to function well, they must cooperate. And that is definitely a form of cooperation. So without getting too deep into supply and demand, everyone can understand that if you needed something, so the free market system, let's go back that way. The free market system says, leave it up, rather than have the government determine what goods and services are available, you leave it up to the citizens to create and distribute and exchange goods and services and create jobs for their market, for their product. So if I created a product, or there's a demand for a product, a widget, and it takes me 2 people to create that widget and bring it to market. So the community needs a widget. The supplier then creates jobs to produce that widget. Those jobs then create additional requests for more widgets. And so the supply side gets, they're able to grow, they're able to provide the goods and services that the community needs, and the community can afford those because they are working and helping to create the supply of the things that they demand. So that's kind of a rudimentary, basic idea of economics. Now, Ronald Reagan brought forth the idea that, or I can say he brought forth, he helped make that a part of our national economic policy, that giving more to business owners, in other words, cutting their taxes, making sure that they were cared for, that they would somehow do the right thing. So there's the assumption that good people will do the right thing for the benefit of the common good. Now, we can point to example after example where maybe that isn't playing out as he had expected. And so when we've, at this point, gone back to that with the current president in office, pushing through that large tax break and squashing a lot of regulations, we've gone back to that ideology. And one particular political party in our society has since the Reagan era pushed for these less taxes on business owners on the supply side. And I have not been comfortable with the arguments that were made for the reason for this to happen. So if we have a system of shared interests, and you assist one side of the scale more than you assist the other, is it possible for things to balance out? And that, to me, is the question. If you only deal with one side of the scale, can you balance the scale that way? So in business, one of the things that I am concerned about when assisting just business, business comes inherent with risk. That means you can overproduce. You can not get the right labor force necessary to produce your product. So there are a lot of risks associated with the business. Now, the attempt to mitigate that risk by forces outside of the company, such as when government attempts to help business avoid those risks. My belief is that government is then at that point picking the winners and losers in society. If you have a free market system where, and Keynesian economists are staunch supporters of competition, because competition helps balance that scale, because it allows downward pressure on prices, upward pressure on labor, on wages, and better management of supplies and resources. By eliminating all of the regulations and helping businesses in times of trouble, and we can point to a recent instance in 2008 when the financial sector made bets that were risky and negatively impacted society on a grand scale. And the government then supported the side of businesses, believing that by not allowing these businesses to experience the pain of their mistakes, that it was best for society as a whole. So they took away the risk. Now, one of the things that I've heard, you may have heard people talk about, is that reward is privatized and risk is becomes public domain, so that they didn't have to suffer completely through their mistakes and necessarily learn from that. I think risk in business is good. One of the things about risk is that if you believe, or if you know that you can lose your business, if you become lax, if you don't pay attention to your customer, if you are not aware of changes in the supply chain and the way people want to do business and the products that they want to use, then you as a business will fail. And that's what that risk is. So the risk to me is it allows businesses that don't do the right things to be removed from the public trading sphere. And that the stronger businesses are going to be the ones that adapt and do what is necessary to achieve stability. If you remove that risk, then companies that do not do all of the necessary hard work of paying attention to customers, paying attention to supplies, paying attention to long-term, um, long-term. I don't want to say prognostications, but long-term changes in the market. If they don't do that, then how do you justify keeping that business in place? That management or business owner is not doing what is necessary to make sure that they're meeting the needs of society, of the common good of society. So what you could wind up having is a company that is in business for themselves, make sure that they get what they need and are not meeting the needs of the community that they serve. So competition and risk are two other sides of the ledger that are there to keep businesses from becoming lax, from becoming comfortable in the space that they're in and not innovating for the future and not paying attention to their customers. What you have noticed, what I have noticed recently, is that there are a lot more websites, when I visit websites, there are a lot more requests for you to take a survey so that they can get feedback from you about how they're doing. That used to be handled when we had storefronts. That used to be handled right inside the building, right? When you go in and you purchase something, there was somebody there to make sure you got what you needed. And you could see some stores. I was in a, what am I thinking? Office Depot, or not Office Depot. It's a competitor to Lowe's, but anyway, I was in. The name jumps me. So, but I was in recently. Somebody's there and they see me come through the door. If I look like I'm looking for something, can I help you? Can I get you there? And that kind of initial customer contact gives you an opportunity to know if you are serving the needs of your customers. So for a long time, they are cutting floor staff to save on salaries. So because one of the big things that companies have to deal with is burgeoning salaries. And so to maintain maybe a profit or a better profit, they cut floor staff. When you cut that staff, or when you automate, because automation can do the same thing, you basically separate yourself from the customer and you become a large kiosk. So you have a store or a website or whatever the case may be. You're offering products, and you don't have customer contact. You don't have someone engaging the customer to determine if they're getting what they need, if they're finding what they came to find, or even tell them about something else that may be beneficial for them. If the company is not providing that, then they're losing touch with their customers. And that has happened a lot. And it happened for a long period of time. And so now a lot of companies are trying to get back into making that connection with their customers and understanding what their customers' needs are, how they can meet those needs, and determining how to best move forward with their business so that they can continue to meet the demands of the population, so that there becomes this mutual benefit in the relationship, so that it's not just one-sided. So you're not just pulling profits out of the system without putting back into the system what the customers are need. So I think, to me, risk is an essential part of that. And I think supply side economics tries to remove that risk to give companies a level of security that I think is detrimental to the balancing of the scales between supply and demand. Now, so part of the discussion about taxes, so they cut the taxes for businesses in this last tax cut. And the difficulty I have with that is if you truly believe that this is a strategy, that if you allow business to be the arbiter of all of the wages and supply and demand, if there, then there wouldn't be any need to recover that tax break that you gave. So the federal budget is made up of taxes paid. So the Republicans and President number 45 provided a tax cut. Then to cover that tax cut, they eliminated wage increase for federal workers. They eliminated regulations. Now, I know regulations is supposedly a part of that ideology or that economic policy, but by eliminating the regulations, you can cut from the budget those agencies that are tasked with enforcing those regulations. So that brings some of the tax responsibility down. So they did that at the same time. Now, this was before any realization of the tax plan or tax policy actually starting to work, actually starting to produce the kind of economic growth that they believed that it would. Now, there's some argument, quite a bit of argument actually, as to how effective version 1 was under Ronald Reagan. So without any further proof that this tax plan worked, because it created massive debt, that under Ronald Reagan, massive debt that we had never seen as a country was created. And that's not what it was supposed to happen, but that's what did happen. And so doing round 2 of that, without any data that says that's going to be different, there's every reason to believe that it's going to happen again. And we can see attempts to cut taxes someplace else. So now we have the tariffs. Okay, and I don't know if you know how tariffs works, but tariffs is a duty placed on goods and services brought into the country, and that the government gets a chunk off the top. Okay, so a company ships items in. They order supplies from China, and they order goods from China. Okay, those goods have a higher tariff on them, and it's basically considered a tax. I heard one financial analyst, say it's basically a tax, and it's basically a tax because it does not increase the profit margin of the company. So it goes directly from so when it directly attached to the goods when they arrive, and then goes to the federal government. So the company does not get any benefit from that. So it looks like to me that this tariff fight is an attempt, or can be an attempt, to not realize the debt going to be created by the tax cuts. So if you cover some of the taxes lost by the tax cut over the next 2 years, if Trump is out of office, then the debt balloons because of the loss of tax revenue. It is not blamed on probably Trump. Maybe there might be a few voices yelling that, but it can be blamed on the next administration. If the realization does not happen that this tax cut spurs economic growth, which in turn spurs tax receipts, we could see public debt balloon once again, as it did under the Reagan administration. One of the things that I think is important is that, so as I said, the supply side is it basically gives business owners the license to determine economic policy. They get to determine what they want to produce. They get to determine companies that aren't totally responsive to the general population could, in fact, be in business longer than they should be, because they may be. You can eliminate competition. What we've seen is a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and the government has attempted to maintain a level playing field, eliminate those rules and regulations, and some of that competition goes away. So again, I said supply side is about picking winners and losers. I talked about the lack of regulation. Just going through my list of things here that I wanted to cover. I talked about the government trying to recover some of that money that they gave, or that they cut out of the budget when they gave these tax cuts, those tax breaks. They're trying to pick that up on the backs of just the average consumers. They're trying to spread that loss over the entire national economy. So they're trying to spread that around so that it's not as stark, so that hopefully, and my guess is here that they're trying to buy time, is that they believe that these tax cuts are going to spur growth, and that will replace that money lost from the budget by the new tax dollars. I'm not optimistic about that. I think it's quite well, I don't want to say that. We've seen supply side economics version 1. We saw the results of that. I don't think supply side economics version 2 is going to be any different. Unfortunately, I think it's a little more difficult to focus on that now, as we have so many non-important issues becoming the topic of things. So hopefully we can get back to looking at the dollars and cents of government and how to make it best work for everyone, and not have government pick winners and losers, but actually be more of a guard against imbalancing of the scales. I'm not saying I want government to put its finger on the scale for one side or another to balance it, but find a way for government to work effectively to protect both sides of the scale. I don't believe, and I'm going to say this with an asterisk, I don't believe that there is a job-killing regulation. Keep in mind that regulations are created to protect the citizens of the country. So if a producer or a business wants to create a product, and the byproduct of that, for creating that product, contaminates water, the business owner may see that as the cost of creating his product. I've got people that want to buy my product. It's going to kill several people, but I can still, they don't have any incentive necessarily to find a different production method if the government is not making sure, if the government is not there protecting other consumers from a lack of accountability by bad management. So I don't think leaving businesses to their own devices is in the best interest of the common good. I'm going to wrap this up today. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I left out the word Voodoo Economics because I had, in my original text, I had left it in there quite a bit. But I do want to have a conversation be about finding answers and solutions, and not being about throwing stones. I do appreciate you listening in today. You have an opportunity to join the conversation every Saturday at 2 o'clock. If you'd like to find out how, please visit my website. And I want to thank you again for being here. Now, that concludes this episode of Altitude Adjustment, and the video podcast is available on YouTube. Just do a YouTube search for Lion's Den STL. The audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Anchor.fm, the iTunes Store, and the Google Music Play Store. Please consider supporting this podcast by visiting Anchor.fm/altitude-adjustment2. The internet is powered by your likes, shares, and comments. So please, like, share, and comment on this and other episodes, because it matters. As always, be cool, be calm, but above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.